888-928-2929.
And Jack is a jack of all trades, right?
Oh.
Former NFL player.
Yeah, really, what
portfolio
don't you
manager,
do?
philanthropist.
He knows all the economic stuff. He knows all the political stuff. He even knows the sports stuff. And his name is Jack. It's too perfect.
Like I said, jack of all trades. But as the president just said during a briefing earlier, he still seems to be leaving the door open that this meeting could in fact happen. Is this a step in the right direction, Jack?
I think so. I really like his tone. I wish he used this tone in a couple other situations. But, you know, to see and hear President Trump come out the way that he has on North Korea, you know, obviously he's been assertive and aggressive and not backing down. But at the same time, he's putting the ball back into their court. And he's taking a tough stance, which I think they're going to have to make a decision. What I really want to understand more is how China's going to react to this. I mean, we are in deep
negotiations right we're
now.
talking.
This is something. I mean, we're at a turning point in really the future of the world. You got the two biggest powers right now who are negotiating the largest, you know, trade deal ever, and so that's a big deal. So I think this has a lot to do with where we're going with the North Korea talks and negotiations. So I applaud the Trump administration for coming back the way that they did. I think it's great to keep a hard stand right now because Kim Jong-un may have started to feel a little bit comfortable. You know, I think he went over and had meetings with China. And then all of a sudden, you know, you saw him, you know, walking and talking a little bit different. And I think that's what President Trump is coming back at. And I think he's being loud, clear, and assertive and doing what's right for the American people. The president has mocked this leader over and over again. He has made...
Rocket Man? That's
Little Rocket Man.
Little Rocket Man.
And he's told him how fast he can push that button. So
we met with fire and fury, wasn't it? Yeah.
That's right. So I think President Trump has let the world know that he doesn't mess around. And so he probably got up feeling good this morning on the right side of the bed. And I think he knows deep inside that this is really a negotiation with China. And so at the same time, I think he is appreciative for them releasing our hostages ahead of these meetings. And I think...
which he said so in that letter.
Yeah, very graciously. And so, yeah, this is a good president. This is a presidential President Trump. I like seeing him really react in this way. You know, it doesn't give, you know, the other side a lot to talk about. I mean, how can you argue with that letter? Very diplomatic. And so hopefully it works. And if it doesn't,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
You'll see that same hard fist, iron fist guy come out.
Oh, yeah, I think so too.
In a second.
And if you think about it, you know, if you're negotiating, for example, with a child, you'd say, oh, it's okay, honey, I know you made a mistake.
Yeah.
But, you know, we're going to try this again. So get up, dust yourself off. You know, that's kind of almost the feeling.
There was the biggest rollback of bank rules since the financial crisis. You're an investment guy. You played the stock market all the time. One of your favorite hobbies.
Sometimes on commercials.
This is a pretty big deal. Talking about Dodd-Frank, there's also talk of the president and imposing tariffs on some of these imported cars. Want to get your thoughts on that real quick before we do talk about the NFL's new policy, which also you have expertise in as well.
Well, Dodd-Frank has crippled a lot of banks in our country, particularly smaller banks, smaller regional banks that are in areas and in neighborhoods that may not be as affluent. So it's really good to see some of these rollbacks happening. You know, at the crux of it, if you look at this law, you are requiring reserve amounts that banks just couldn't keep up with. So you're making them raise large amounts of money and have capital reserves in order to protect themselves from a downfall like we saw back in 2008.
So for the consumers watching at home that may not understand all this, because you live, eat, and breathe this, what does this mean for the people watching? Is this a good thing? How is this going to help Americans that are watching right now?
Americans, especially if you're living in areas where you're losing your banks or have lost your banks. I mean, I read a report the other day, and there's a lot of neighborhoods and areas that don't even have community banks anymore. This is very good for you. It still keeps regulations on the big banks and they're not lax so much where they can do whatever they want to, but you know, you're not piling on compliance costs and legal costs on top of these smaller banks that just their bottom lines can't afford it. I mean, I ran an investment advisory company for years, and if you saw the amount that I paid for legal and compliance in the last few years after Dodd-Frank, it was astronomical.
And does that get passed on to the consumer then?
Of course, it has to.
Okay, so does this mean we're going to be paying less if you go to some of these smaller banks?
It should trickle down. It should trickle down.
Okay.
You know, it depends on what interest rates are doing and other things.
I mean, obviously
but,
that's
the
what,
cost of capital will be what it is. But Dodd-Frank.
Does it mean less paperwork?
Yes. Yes.
Less paperwork, more money in your pocket.
Yeah, I like that.
But you have to stand proudly for the national anthem. Well, you shouldn't be playing. You shouldn't be there. Maybe you shouldn't be in the country. You have to stand proudly for the national anthem. And the NFL owners did the right thing if that's what they've done.
And Jack, the president went one step further, and he said, if people don't, in that particular interview on Fox News with Brian Kilmeade, he said, if they don't stand for the national anthem, maybe they shouldn't even be in the country. He's taking some criticism for that, but what say you?
President Trump is being President Trump. This issue has been near and dear to me, near and dear to my family, my friends. You know, a lot of the folks, I know folks that are standing, and I know folks that are kneeling. And so I take it back to what is the messaging here, right? I think the National Football League came out with a powerful message, and that message is this. This is America. If you don't want to stand for the flag, you don't have to, but stay in the locker room. Because at the end of the day, you're at work, and this is a business. I can't come to Newsmax and do what I want.
Yeah. Right.
I can't go to Merrill Lynch or wherever else that employs people and do what I want. And the National Football League should be no different. This is a time in our country where we have issues with race, and we all know that. There are situations that happen in some of these inner city neighborhoods where African-American young men are shot with unarmed, and those need to be addressed. But you don't address it in front of our flag. That's not the time during a game.
So
Players make millions of dollars.
So when you say that, because as a former NFL player, when you said you have friends on both sides, those who choose to kneel, those who choose not to. When you say you don't think it's a time or place, using kind of your, you treat it as a business, a lot of people would agree with you, saying you're wearing that uniform, you represent the team, you represent NFL. This is not on your own time. If here are your options. When you tell them that stance, those friends of yours that choose to kneel, what kind of response do you get?
Many look at it as a social opportunity to put social messaging across. I look at it differently. I look at it as if you're at work. And I know as an African American, I came from humble beginnings. My family didn't have a lot of money. So I know the resources that the National Football League brought to me, and I know the millions of dollars that a lot of players are making can go back into their communities. They can go help their families. And so the National Football League's success is good for black people. Right? This is what this issue is about. That's why they're kneeling. This is good for black people, the National Football League, because it's giving resources to individuals that never have them. Those resources can go back into the community. But when you kneel and you upset half of the country and our ratings are dropping 20, 25%,
almost
now
30,
it's hit
wasn't it?
almost 30%,
right?
Now you're hitting the bottom line. That is not a great tactic. And no one intended on that, right? So the players never went and kneeled against the military. They weren't kneeling against folks. But what they were kneeling against is, black people being treated poorly by a very small fraction of police officers. But they don't have that message come across sometimes because they put blanket statements out and people can say, bring military in, bring police in. I know we got to go.
Yeah, I got to bring everyone to a commercial break. We're going to talk about gun control and what the governor of Texas is proposing. We'll be right back. What do you think about the governor's proposals now, and particularly this red flag law that, again, Senator Marco Rubio, as you know, received a lot of flack for supporting?
First off, I want to be clear. I think AR-15s, if you're going to own them, you should have a special license. Okay. So that's the ban that I would support, and I don't think any of these issues would affect what's happening in our schools. I think that's deeper. But when you talk about the red flags and improving our gun laws, I'm always for that. But I think there is a balance. At the end of the day, I don't want you taking my right to protect my family and my home and to own a gun. So if anything that leads to that, I don't even want to have.
But what if they believe, now these red flag laws are designed that if I believe, let's just use Dr. Gina for example, but if I believe that she is a harm to herself or to others, I can go to a court and make it so she would not be able to obtain a gun. Are you in favor of stuff like that?
100%, and it's sad that it's not already happening. You know, right here in Parkland, you had a kid that had the police calling him 45 times,
Right.
and they did nothing. And so
Right.
in those situations, that should go to law enforcement. But Gina, you're an expert at this, so I would love to
Hear her thoughts. I would too, because I love this.
There's so much to unpack right here, and unfortunately, these segments are too short. But I feel very strongly that our Second Amendment was not set up only for personal protection from other people. It was also set up for personal protection from our government, and that is why we should not specify the guns that are already inaccessible to the average citizen. That's enough limits, in my personal opinion. And with the corruption we see in the government agencies right now, that thought scares me to death.
Gina, you make a very valid point. I never even thought about it that way, but I would agree. I think we have to use some common sense too. And if you look at the situations that are happening, you know, particularly the one that just happened in Texas, the parents should have been able to see that this kid had some things going on with him mentally. If you just look at the post that he was doing, and what, you know, the kid came to school with a trench coat and it was 90 degrees outside. Just that alone, you should be able to take guns away and anything else, because that means you're.
So do you think there should be like clear backpacks like they're doing in Parkland, Florida, metal detectors, bulletproof windows, teachers should be armed? I mean, we're running out of time, but if you could impose one thing, what would it be?
The first thing that I would impose in schools is to start bringing a paddle back and start spanking these kids' butts when they do something wrong.
Jack Brewer.
That's the first thing that I would do.
Well,
And the second thing that I would do is put in metal detectors. Just common sense. You have metal
Right.
detectors in your schools.
We don't have shootings in Capitol buildings or courthouses anymore.
Exactly.
All right,
Sporting
well,
events and everything.
You heard what they think.